All right, about to start class, and so you only had. Well, first off, I want to say Hatut the Antut Kul, that is peace be unto you all, and just want to say hope everyone had a great week so far. We're at the hump period. It's Wednesday, and just wanted to start off with some type of information and, just give a fresh perspective on things as we usually do here on Science in Nuwaupu. And I think first thing people gotta learn how not to do is not take politics too seriously, but at the same time, don't take it for granted at the same time. Meaning that I think what happens is we tend to, as a people, as black people as a whole, we tend to always want that Messiah type. What I mean by Messiah type, we always want someone to save us from a situation. And we have to understand that no one's going to save us from our current situation at this point except ourselves. The only way we're going to really get anywhere at this point is we have to learn how to first not take, that's why I said not take politics too seriously, because we have to understand that they're not for us. All of it is truly a game. But yet at the same time, what we will do is do not take it for granted, meaning that, don't take it too lightly, meaning that you have to pay attention to what is going on. Because the reality is that whatever is going on around you does affect you. They make decisions that affect our lives consistently, especially with, where we're living at. Our current living situations, our current living conditions is being met. Is being talked about, and decisions are being met based upon us. When we deal with poverty, the first people that is hit is the African in America. And the best way to solve that issue is at some point in the near future is that we have to consolidate as black people, and we have to start creating our own means of income for ourselves. And if we're going to do that, which means that we have to be totally independent of anybody else, and we have to be totally dependent on self. And the only way to really do that is we have to dismiss whatever is going on outside of self. My father, Dr.York, decided to go into the next phase of Nuwaupu, which is Pan-Africanism, something he talked about for several years, and he decided to go into that full-fledged, not so much full-fledged, but adopt the ideology of Garvey very recently, in terms of making a connection to Africa. You can't be a Pan-Africanist and still want to be connected to the oppressor or the evil one and his ways. You can't be connected to the enemy and still have the same enemy. That doesn't work. And the biggest question I notice from a lot of people is that, can you side with white folks in this society against your current condition? And the reality is, if you're using non-reasoning, you realize, no, you can't. You can't connect yourself with the enemy. The enemy is always going to be there. And they're constantly working 24 hours a day. That's why they deal with a code. My father talked about them being machines. They have basically evolved into being machines that are constantly linked up all the time, especially when it deals with affairs, considering you all, considering us. And the problem with us is that we always think that people will always want to help with us, or we can always help them, and we can always create some type of allegiance to everybody else, but no one's trying to do the same thing with you. And so if we learn and try to understand that we are our own ally, we are our own friends, you have no other friends outside of self, which is something that Dr. John Henry Clark has said years ago, that you have no friends. The African has no friends except self. Because if that was the case on the continent, the African is the poorest in the continent of Africa, the biggest continent on the planet, but is the poorest. and everybody else, not just the Hasidic Jews, not just the Anglo-Saxons of America or the Celtics of America, but also those of China, is raping the resources of Africa. And until an African Union is truly formed, then they will constantly and will always make money off of us, and will always use our resources that truly belong to us for their own personal gain. So the reality for us is that we have to be able to come together as a conglomerate and deal with each other for ourselves. The biggest thing I notice is that we're constantly having a long way to go in terms of cutting off the system. I mean, the system, I'm talking about things on TV, things that we see on a daily basis. You know, people will sit up here and will post about Nicki Minaj and Miley Cyrus, but they're not posting anything about a book they're reading. They're not posting anything about a business that they're putting together, because the next step of black consciousness is currency within yourself. If you're not creating some form of currency within yourself, you're not truly conscious. You're just a person reading books. So it's merely entertainment to you. So the next phase within self has to be some form of economics. If economics is not talked about, you are truly not conscious. So the next level is that you would like to be broke. What I mean by the next level is that the next level of entertainment for you. You would rather read the books and listen to what my father says in the updates, or listen to Dr. Claude Anderson and that deals with economics, but you don't want economics for yourself. So the reality is that if we're not trying to create economics for ourselves that's going to save us from our own situation, then we will be in trouble. One of the main things of Nuwaupu is that you cannot rely on your enemy for anything at all. And what that means is that you have to dismiss whatever type of government assistance that you have at some point. Not saying now, but at some point you have to want to disconnect yourself from any form of assistance from your oppressor, from the enemy that is constantly trying to rape resources from you to build for his own people. Because you can't truly call yourself conscious if you're collecting food stamps, if you're collecting some form of government assistance from them. And so that is another problem, okay? You can't be conscious, but yet want to still benefit from them on their side. So that is an actuality. And so that is not a white man way of thinking. That is a reality way of thinking. If you are dependent, you're not conscious. The opposite of sleep is having an independent spirit, because you're no longer a slave. A slave thinks in terms of assistance for himself or herself or their family. I need to rely on the government to deal with what I need to do, as opposed to doing it yourself. Because if you're still relying on the government, who are you really God over? You understand? You definitely are not, especially not God over yourself. So if it's about that, if you're really about trying to, or are you only just willing to be into something, willing to be in something just to say you're a part of it, as opposed to becoming independent for self? So that's the next step that we have to take into. You understand? At least right now, so that you can be, because you truly can't turn yourself inside out and you're constantly punching a clock. It's gonna always be a conflict there somewhat. You understand? So we have to get to a point where there's nothing in our way that's stopping us from making that next step, that step to the next phase of our existence on this planet and beyond. So we have to get that in our minds as well, that we have to be ready to be able to only depend upon self. You can't depend upon the enemy and call him the enemy, because he obviously is your ally if you're relying on him or her for some form of assistance. Okay? And just to address questions that I've had in my inbox the last couple of days, someone asked me in my inbox, they had just gotten into consciousness, but they were already in an interracial relationship, and they wanted to know exactly what should they do about that. And my question, and my answer to that would be, you waking up to a situation, first of all, you are in control of that situation. Because if you're in an interracial relationship, I'm assuming it's a white woman, okay, because it was a man, you have to be able to deal with something, what we call being conscious. Being conscious is not about reading books. I have to keep reiterating that. Being conscious is accepting your situation and doing something about it. If I know that I am with an individual that I have made it my genes with, that I understand that this individual does not mean me any good. This person is the enemy. This is the white woman is still the enemy. Just because you may say white man does not exclude white woman. So if you're in a relationship with a white woman, then what you must do with anybody interracially, let's just be specific about that, okay? You have to understand that you're going to always be going into two opposite directions. I would rather be with a sister who's a Christian or a Muslim. That way, she can learn from me and eventually take on the information that I'm giving her and let it transform self. But if I'm in a relationship with someone who is of another race, I'm in a relationship. Because part of consciousness also is that I'm realizing if I'm in an interracial relationship, I'm in a relationship with someone who's going into the opposite direction. You can't, and this is something I also want to say that's connected to what we're saying, but is separate from what we're saying. Meaning that you cannot call yourself independent as a race of people trying to fight for their liberation and be connected to Caucasians, be connected to the enemy. White man is the enemy of our people. So if you're trying to still be in some form of relations with them, you always have a conflict of interest within self. So you have to understand that it will be time to move on from that if you so choose to do. That is up to the individual. But you can't stay in a situation with an individual and think that that's going to be okay, because it will not be okay. That will not make any sense whatsoever. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to stay in an interracial relationship with someone who does not mean you any good whatsoever. Okay, because they're from another. They're going to go their own situation. They're going to go their own separate way, because every race and every group that we deal with on this planet, they are as my father Dr. York said, they're in a race for success. And if you have intermingled with a whole different group, it's going to detour your journey, because they're not in the same frame mind as you, in the same mind frame as you. They don't want the same aspirations as you. They're just trying to get along. They're just trying to better their race of people. They're not going to help your race at all. So until you understand that situation, you understand you're going to always want to intermingle with the enemy. And so what people like to also do is they try to say, well, it's not my fault. I didn't know I was already in a relationship. I'm like, but we can't. And the next step is I can't make that decision for an individual. You're a man. So at the end of the day, you have to make that decision. You got to move on from your enemy and deal with someone who is going to be in the same direction as you, someone who is an African woman. And if you cannot do that, then you are in the wrong place. You might as well stay where you are and stay within the system of white supremacy, because they have a place for you. But if you're unable to get away from that, then stay where you are. But if you are able to get away from that, then it's time for you to move on from that, regardless of the situation, because consciousness is also, okay, I'm in a bad situation. What do I do about it? There's no more blame game. We realize that we've been put here for a cause to die in our situation, whether it be the hood or the ghetto or whatever word you want to use, but it's our responsibility to get ourselves out of it. And you can't truly fight for liberation again with the wife of your oppressor and your enemy. Because at the end of the day, they're going to always see you as just another nigga or the slave. See, that's the thing with black people. We tend to be in relationships with these with these white women and white men, thinking that they're, on the same level as us, but they see you socially beneath them. Just like in slavery, they're going to always see you as inferior or a slave. So you think at the end of the day that because you are with this individual, that all of a sudden you are somewhat on their level or they're on your level. So no, you must break away from that system. And when it means to break away from a system, it means to be completely away from the women, from the food, etc. So you have to make that decision. The brother that asked me the question in my inbox, you have to make the decision. You're at a crossroads. Either you're going to fully wake up and move on from these people, or you can stay with what you've been doing and pretend you never read anything in the world. So that's a situation, okay? And I'm going into hopefully that answered the brother's question. I'm going into the next question. Give me a chance to go through it. It's about my father's situation right now. We are just waiting on, it's a month and a half, about a month and a half. He should be, it's like daily. We're counting down to the next step for him to be sent to Liberia. And it just comes down to the energy that we put forth for it to work for him, because it's all about the energy that we put forth. Everything else is irrelevant now, as far as I'm concerned. Everything else is totally irrelevant. But that's what it comes down to. I don't have too much else information in terms of his situation. I know his health is not doing very well right now. But that's the biggest thing right now is is him being sent to where he needs to be, which is out of the system of the devil, out of prison and into Liberia. And that's what we're trying to, do for my father and move on from the situation. So I'm glad that, what people are asking about also mainly should be also his health. How is he doing? Because it's up and down right now. Like sometimes, within the last year or so, you hear that he's in a wheelchair. Arthritis is starting to kick in. The man is 70. So you're going to have, times where he's not going to be in the best of health. He's 70 years old. So we just have to take into consideration of his age, that his body is starting to break down, and just be more concerned about his health as opposed to a book coming out. That's the one thing I notice is that people are asking more about a book, a new book here, a new book there, as opposed to how is his health and what's going on with that. And that's it's something that I see. Love is shown, regardless of what you say. Love is something that you show to other people, and to define it, it's based on love is based on just concern for an individual and welfare for an individual, as opposed to what the individual can do for you. And if you can learn and understand that, you'll be in great hands, people who will be around you will be in great hands, because they'll understand that you know what love is. The concern for an individual and that if he, let's say, our father gets out, my father gets out of prison, and he may not be able to teach another class, would that bother you? It's all about, for some people it's about books, how much books he writes. For me, it's about, his health, getting himself together. But ultimately, it's about what he decides to do for himself. If he decides to continue doing what he wants to do, then let him do that. Which is good. Hey, that's how I feel about it. Whatever he decides to do is up to him. I just am more concerned about his well-being than a book coming out. That's how I look at it. So that's the question about his health and everything. And good question. I'm glad someone asked about that. I look for that. Who asked about his health? Show people that show concern. Concern is very much needed right now. Don't see too much of that. And, yeah, very important. Of course, one last thing before we shut down. I'm going to shut down, a little earlier, 7:30, because I didn't have too many questions. But, again, we have to learn also with everything going on with our people that we've actually slipped back into a form of Jim Crow. And the way things are going in this society is that we are afraid almost. We don't have too much respect for ourselves. And this is something that Dr. Welsing said. A nation of people who don't defend themselves don't respect themselves. So if you are not prepared to defend yourself, you don't respect yourself too much. And we have to be ready to defend ourselves and defend our families as men and as women. That's reality. If we're not ready to do that, then we just better get ready. That's what it's all about. And that's me speaking from a man's perspective. But at the same time, we have to be able to, like I said, be able to at least think about protection and just think about self-defense. If we could think about those things, then we will be okay. But if we're running around not knowing what to do, then we will not know what to do. We will be in bad shape, because the devil counts on our fear. The biggest thing with the devil and his system and the police now is fear. They know that we fear them. And when a person fears death and they know how scared niggas are right now, you can get them to do anything. You can get them to do anything you want them to do because they're afraid. But if you can find someone who isn't afraid, then you'll be less quick to jump on them and to try to, intimidate them. Because it's all about intimidation factors at this point. They want to intimidate black people to do what they want them to do and to bow down to them. And when you don't bow down to the devil, then they're going to act irrationally, which they're constantly doing and doing their best to get away with it day in and day out. So, again, just to wrap this up, defend yourself. Defend your family, defend your children, and learn to not have any fear in this situation. If you can, get out of their way. But if you cannot get out of their way and they're coming directly at you, just know the law, but at the same time, know that you have the right to defend yourself. You understand? That is very important. I know it's a short one, but there we get at least a half an hour in. I just want to say, Hatub Lia Antut, peace be unto you, and Wadu.